In this lesson, we're going to be looking at how to use CSV files. First of all, have a look at this code. You should have done text files already. What does this code do? And what else could we do with file handling? Well, hopefully you should have come to the conclusion that this is how we open a text file and how we write to a text file. Remember, when we use an open line, we use a W for write at the end of line 1. Remember that file.close is important because otherwise this keeps our data in memory. There are many ways that we can do file handling. So using Notepad and using text files is just one way. You can also use a tool called Pickle, which stores data as binary, and it's quite a nice way of using data. You can also use a CSV file, and this is what we're going to be looking at this lesson. And each way has its own methods. When deciding, you need to think about which is going to be the most efficient for you. We can think of CSV files as spreadsheets. Think of how data is structured in a spreadsheet. If it looks a little bit like a flat file database, this could be a good way of us storing data. We separate values by commas in CSV files, and it's really efficient with dealing and storing with data. It's easier to move data into our system because of the way it is stored compared to a text file, but it can be slightly more complicated. To use a CSV file handler, we need to import the CSV module. Now be careful, when we read data in from a CSV file, it imports it as a string. So it's not automatically going to add any data types that you might have from a CSV file or from a spreadsheet. You need to make sure that before you import data in a CSV file, it's saved as a CSV, delimited file, just like the one that is shown on the screen. Here's an example. When we're importing CSV, we use with open. We've used open in a text file before. You can see example.csv, it's just an example, is just a file just in the folder. And this file needs to be in the same file as your Python folder. And we've said as CSV file. Now, this is our variable name, CSV file. The next line says reader, so we set a reader, that's our file handler. And we use a method imported from CSV, from the CSV class, csv.reader. Inside there, we're using our method, our variable, which we're saying is our data which we want to import, a delimiter, which is a space, and a quote char. Now, it's just, these are standard, keep these the same in your code for now. And then we have a iterative loop for row in reader. Reader, remember, is our variable name that we've made, and row is going to be for each row in our file. And you can see how we're printing and joining those rows. Try this code and see what happens when you don't use the print join. This is how we would write CSV files. It's a very, very similar structure. However, we're using write.writeRow. WriteRow is our method. We have the same structure in our writer, csv.writer method. However, we have a new section at the end, quoting equals csv.quoteMinimal. Try this code and see if you can write to a file.